Well, so what exactly are we concentrating on when we say that we're imaging the tear film? What we often forget as ophthalmologists is that the first refracting surface on the eye is not the cornea but the tear film. So it is extremely important for us to understand the tear film. Well, there are n number of ways how you can image the tear film. I'm going to deconstruct this step by step, and let's start with the meibomian glands. What do we understand meibomian glands? They form the lipid layer of the tear film. The functional evaluation can be done by something called as the meibomian gland evaluator. What it does is basically it gives a pressure which is equal to a forced blink, which is 1.6 gram per millimeter square, and it actually evaluates as to how many glands are open and how many glands are blocked. So based on this, we can come up with the scoring and decide if the patient has got meibomian gland obstruction or not. So the basic evaluation based on the meibomian gland evaluator helps us understand if the patient has got an evaporative component of the dry eye or not. Okay, moving on, what are the other methods by which we can evaluate the meibomian glands or image the meibomian glands? Is the topographer, the keratograph, which is the officially marketed by Oculus, which is the prime importance of a keratograph is it measures the meibomian glands beautifully well. Along with that, we can also use the confocal microscopy. We can use a handheld keratograph, and most importantly, we can use a simple tool like an autoref. How? We'll be seeing it further. So starting with what is the standard, which is the Oculus keratograph. What it basically does is it's an infrared camera. So on eversion of the lid, you can image, capture, and then evaluate it further and see which are the normal glands and which are the normal glands and which are the gland dropouts. How do we actually quantify and grade this? Well, there is a grading which is published in ophthalmology, which shows that based on the amount of the gland dropout, you can score them between score 0 to score 3. As I told you that any infrared camera as the working principle can image the meibomian glands. So this has been done on an abrometer on the right hand side. If you see, it's quite comparable to the actual standard keratograph. How we need to do this is basically in the clinic. If you can see the right upper video where we are everting the lid, and then it is just focusing with the joystick. And what you see here is basically not on a keratograph but on your abrometer. The same thing can work over your autoref as well. So what it does, it does not capture the image, but it grossly helps you screen and understand if the patient has got any abnormalities in the meibomian glands anatomically. So why are we imaging the meibomian glands? Because there is a pathway that is involved which again responds to hyperosmolarity and causes inflammation, and thus the dry eye sets in. So the different manifestations of the different diseases that we see are basically all revolving around the tear film instability, osmolarity, and the inflammation. What are the other methods that we can image the tear film? Now this was the anatomical aspect of it when we are imaging the meibomian glands per se. How do we image the tear film or the lipid layer of the tear film? Because it is lipid, you can imagine a blot of water on top of that. If you just drop an oil drop, you can see how the dispersion or the 7 rays of the 7 colors are seen dispersed on oil on water. This is exactly the same principle, what we call as the interferometry. So it is measuring the color interference pattern and measuring how thick or how healthy the tear film is. The most commonly used is our clinical method of measuring the T-bath, and of course the non-invasive TBUT is other method by which we can evaluate the tear film, the lipid layer of the tear film. As I mentioned earlier, how do we measure? So this is exactly the way you can see oil on water, and this is done by the LipiView, which is by Tear Science. The simplest replacement for this is the T-bath. What LipiView does is it basically, as I mentioned, it's based on interferometry, and it measures the lipid layer thickness specifically, and it quantifies in ICU units. So anything less than 60 is abnormal or dry eye, and anything above 75 is normal. This is just an example, a visual example as to how you can understand what a healthy tear film looks like and what is abnormal. So if you look at this, with every blink, you can actually see the tear film distributing itself over the cornea. So this is what a normal tear film looks like, and you can see the ICU unit is 91, which means it is a good tear film. Going beyond, what does a poor tear film look like? It is a patient with dry eye. You can see with every blink, the interference pattern does not come up, which is also represented by the ICU unit. Okay, what is most important in this LipiView is that it gives you the amount of partial blinks that a person does. So it is not only the lipid layer which is important, it is also important that we see if the patient is blinking completely or not. So if you look at this, the patient here is not blinking completely, and that is why even with the normal metrics, the TBUT was less, so was the patient experiencing the dry eye symptoms. How else can we evaluate the symptoms of dry eye? Well, going beyond the imaging from the tear film, it reciprocates on the corneal epithelium as well. So you can image it on your anterior segment OCT, which is the octaview, which is reciprocated again on the confocal microscopy. So the epithelial cells are slightly abnormal in cases of dry eye as compared to the normal. Now we always, these patients are patients who come to us with severe symptoms, and then you keep wondering as to if the metrics are still normal, why are these patients experiencing symptoms? So that means the Schirmer's is normal, the tear film breakup time is absolutely normal, so why are these patients experiencing symptoms? So there is a certain cohort of patients which we call as the atypical dry eye, where you do not know where the sensory stimulus is coming from. So we evaluated these patients and we found that patients who had no symptoms had absolutely normal nerves, whereas the patients who had mild symptoms had few dendritic cells which were impinging on the nerves, and the patients with severe symptoms had more dendritic cells, which proves our basic science knowledge that there is an inflammatory component in dry eye, which is proved on the imaging in vivo confocal microscopy. We also published this recently in a journal. What we go beyond, which is also been supported by other literature review, that there are dendritic cells and there is loss of nerves in patients with severe dry eye. Now it is the symptomatic experience that patient feels. Let's just go beyond what the patient sees, because as we said, the first refracting surface is the tear film. So what does the patient see is, if a patient has got a poor lipid layer, obviously there is going to be more scatter of the light that is entering the eye. So this is what a patient clinically sees. So this is simulated E-chart, which shows that with the amount of tear film breakup time, it corresponds to the deterioration in the vision, which is again seen in this modulation transfer function. But what we can see is that clinically, if you put a drop of a lubricant, the patient's vision improves significantly. Now this also helps us define, now this is a method by which we can optically just look at the tear film and quantify the tear film. This is called the OCAS, or the HT analyzer. What it basically does is it measures the tear film scatter, and it gives you the output in the form of point spread function. It also gives you the modulation transfer function. So if you put a lubricating eye drop, or if you want to quantify how poor the patient is seeing, it is very easy to explain this to a patient. Now, this was a small study that we did in our hospital, where we tried out different lubricating eye drops on different kinds of dry eye patients with aqueous deficient and evaporated dry eye. And we saw that.
Can you sum up, please?
Yes. So, well, it just helps us decide which lubricating would suit the best. We have also stepped into an touch territory of the biomarkers. We are actually imaging, and not only imaging, we are also understanding what happens at a basic science point of view, which we call as the newer newer pathways that we are finding in the eyes. This is just a summation of everything. Basically, from a tear Shrama strip, you can find out multiple diseases. So it is not only dry eye, it broadens our horizons in evaluating and understanding multiple diseases just from a single Shrama strip. Thank you very much.